Every Star Trek Voyager character who appeared in Lower Decks, because Star Trek Lower Decks takes place in the early 2380s, shortly after the USS Voyager's return to the Alpha Quadrant in 2378. Cameos from Star Trek Voyager characters are not only possible but expected in Lower Decks' nearly overflowing basket of Star Trek Easter eggs. Star Trek Voyager characters crossing over to Star Trek Lower Decks establishes the continuity between the two shows, and also helps viewers catch up with USS Voyager crew members after Voyager ended. This is especially interesting for the Voyager characters who aren't in Star Trek Prodigy or Star Trek Picard. In the few years since Captain Catherine Janeway's Kate Mulgrew homecoming, the details of the USS Voyager's perilous journey from the Delta Quadrant have become common knowledge among Lieutenants Beckett Mariner, Tawny Newsome, Brad Boimler, Jack Quaid, Sam Rutherford, Eugene Cordero, Devana Tendi, Noel Wells, and Tlyn Gabrielle Ruiz. The USS Voyager's place in Starfleet history as the Little Intrepid-class starship that traversed 70,000 light-years in a mere 7 years makes the Star Trek Voyager crew into modern legends, not quite on the level of the USS Enterprise D crew, but heroes to the USS Cerritos junior officers all the same. An honorable mention, and it's literally just a mention, goes to Jerry Ryan's 7 of 9, whose name is dropped in Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, Episode 9, The Inner Fight. Seven's name appears on a list of former Starfleet officers and associates who might need protection in the wake of a series of targeted attacks. While the USS Cerritos goes after disgraced ex-Starfleet cadet Nick Locarno, Robert Duncan McNeil, another ship gets to look for 7 of 9, who at the time of Star Trek Lower Decks is working as a vigilante with the Fenris Rangers near the Romulan Neutral Zone. Naturally, Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 3 will always have Tom Paris, includes the USS Voyager's helmsman Lieutenant Tom Paris, visiting the USS Cerritos. Paris is on a handshake tour of Starfleet vessels as part of a public relations campaign following Voyager's return to the Alpha Quadrant. As an enthusiast of all things Starfleet, Ensign Brad Boimler is excited to meet Tom Paris and get his commemorative Voyager, VOY, plate signed. Despite the fact that Tom Paris was in prison when Star Trek Voyager began, Paris's years of service on the USS Voyager proved his dedication to Starfleet. Like Commander Chakotay, Robert Beltran, and Voyager's other Maquis crew members, Paris's crimes against the Federation were forgiven, and his Starfleet rank was reinstated. Commander Tuac Tim Russ appears for just a moment in Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 1, Grounded. The glimpse of Tuac in Star Trek Lower Decks reveals that the USS Voyager's former chief security officer has been promoted to full commander and still works with Starfleet security. Tuvok's Vulcan mind meld abilities are instrumental in the success of Starfleet Security's mission to free the USS Cerritos' Captain Carol Freeman, Don Lewis, by uncovering the Pagel conspiracy that framed Freeman. Commander Tuac doesn't speak in the brief flashback, so technically Star Trek Lower Decks can't count Tim Russ among its many Star Trek cameos. If the upcoming final season of Star Trek Lower Decks does feature Star Trek Voyager's resident Vulcan in a speaking cameo, Lower Decks would be the third Star Trek show that Russ appears in as Tuac after Voyager and Star Trek Picard. Star Trek Lower Decks, the animated comedy that celebrates all things Star Trek, has been full of references to past shows in the franchise. One of the most notable is the way it brings back characters from previous series, including those from Star Trek Voyager. The legendary starship Voyager, stranded in the Delta Quadrant, was helmed by a memorable crew whose legacy continued beyond their journey's end. Some of these characters have made surprise appearances in Lower Decks, delighting fans who appreciate the show's ability to blend humor with deep Trek lore. Let's take a look at every Voyager character who has appeared in Lower Decks. 1. Tom Paris, perhaps the most recognizable face from Voyager to appear in Lower Decks, is LT. Tom Paris. Voiced once again by Robert Duncan McNeil, Paris shows up in the episode We'll Always Have Tom Paris, Season 2, Episode 3. The episode centers around Boimler's excitement at meeting his hero, the famous Voyager helmsman. Boimler even carries around a collectible Tom Paris plate in anticipation of getting it signed, which leads to some amusing hijinks. When Tom Paris finally arrives on the USS Cerritos, the chaotic series of events results in him mistaking Boimler for a Kazan and attacking him. It's a light-hearted moment, but Paris's appearance is a great nod to his iconic role on Voyager. McNeil's performance captures the character's laid-back, mischievous spirit, reminding fans why Paris was such a beloved part of Voyager's crew. 2. Captain Catherine Janeway, while not appearing in the flesh, or in this case animation, Captain Janeway has been referenced multiple times throughout Lower Decks. In the episode I Excretus, Season 2, Episode 8, Mariner and Boimler participate in a holodeck training scenario that involves them making choices in difficult situations drawn from past Starfleet missions. At one point, Mariner faces the Janeway Protocol, a hilarious callback to Janeway's often bold, unorthodox problem-solving strategies during Voyager's time in the Delta Quadrant. Although we haven't yet seen Janeway herself animated, her presence looms large over the Star Trek universe, and her leadership style has clearly left a lasting impact on younger generations of Starfleet officers. 3. Tuac, Voyager's logical Vulcan security officer, hasn't yet appeared on screen in Lower Decks, but his presence has been felt. In Crisis Point 2, Paradoxus, Season 3, Episode 9, Boimler is thrown into a holodeck program that mimics a movie scenario where Tuac is mentioned as someone who could help solve a particular crisis. It's a subtle reference, but a reminder of how Tuvok's calm, methodical approach to security and investigation made him one of Voyager's most valuable assets. Given the series' penchant for deep-cut cameos, it wouldn't be surprising if Tuac himself shows up in future seasons of Lower Decks. Tim Russ, the actor who portrayed Tuac, has continued to be involved in Star Trek projects, so fans are hopeful for a full return in animated form. 4. The Doctor, the holographic Doctor, played by Robert Picardo, has become one of the most beloved characters in the Star Trek franchise. Though he has not yet appeared in person on Lower Decks, his existence is referenced in several ways. In the episode An Embarrassment of Duplers, Season 2, Episode 5, Boimler makes a reference to a hologram rights movement, which is a direct nod to the ethical issues surrounding the Doctor's autonomy in Voyager. The Doctor fought for recognition as a sentient being and played a key role in exploring the rights of artificial life forms in the Star Trek universe. There's hope that the Doctor might one day appear in Lower Decks, given the show's love for paying tribute to past Trek characters. Picardo has also expressed openness to reprising his role, which could lead to another delightful crossover. 5. 7 of 9, the former Borg drone who became one of Voyager's most popular and complex characters, has yet to physically appear in Lower Decks, but she has been alluded to several times. In the episode No Small Parts, Season 1, Episode 10, the crew of the Cerritos encounters ex-Borg drones, and Seven's experience is briefly referenced when they discuss reformed Borg individuals. Given that 7 of 9 has already made a high-profile return in Star Trek Picard, it wouldn't be far-fetched to see her animated appearance in Lower Decks at some point. Her story of redemption and individuality could fit well with the tone of Lower Decks, which often balances humor with heartfelt character development. 6. Neelix, the Talaxian cook, morale officer, and self-appointed ambassador aboard Voyager, has not appeared in Lower Decks, but the show has made several indirect references to his legacy. In the episode Moist Vessel, Season 1, Episode 4, we see a Cerritos officer offering a somewhat dubious culinary creation, reminiscent of the types of experimental dishes Neelix would serve to the crew of Voyager. While this is more of a subtle homage, it's clear that Neelix's unique presence hasn't been forgotten.